Have you ever woken up one morning and thought, what if I stopped trying so hard? What if you stopped answering every invitation out of guilt, stopped keeping in touch just because of history, and simply gave yourself permission to be done? This video isn't about cutting people off. It's about coming home to yourself because something profound happens after 70. Your priorities shift, your tolerance for small talk fades, and the need to please others finally surrenders to a much deeper longing, peace. You'll hear stories, real and imagined, of people like Elaine, William, Margaret, and James, people who quietly walked away from the noise and found something far more valuable in return: time, clarity, and true companionship from within. So stay with me, because the truths we're about to uncover might just challenge everything you thought you needed to be happy in your later years, and they might just set you free. Now let's take a closer look at the 6 powerful reasons why life after 70 might not require a circle of friends. Number 1, you no longer need to prove yourself. In youth, identity is crafted in the eyes of others. We chase approval. We measure our worth through friendships, social circles, applause at parties, invitations to weddings, and the number of birthday messages we receive. But what happens when the applause stops? If you ask Elaine, a 75-year-old former teacher, she'd tell you the applause never mattered. What mattered was who she became after the noise died down. When she stopped needing to be Miss Popular at the community center, she began writing poetry again, something she hadn't done since college. Her verses, raw and unfiltered, were never shared on social media, but they were hers, and that was enough. By the time we reach 70, we've lived through decades of striving. We've built careers, raised families, buried friends, and celebrated grandchildren. At this point, the need to be liked fades away like mist under the morning sun. We no longer need friends to validate us. We don't need witnesses to our worth, because we finally see it clearly ourselves. Psychologist Eric Erickson once suggested that later adulthood is a time of reflection and consolidation, a life stage where individuals face the question, did I live a meaningful life? And that reflection often leads people inward rather than outward. Dr. Susan Pinker, a psychologist and author of The Village Effect, also points out that while social connection is vital for longevity, the quality of connection far outweighs the quantity. She emphasizes that superficial socializing often leaves older adults more fatigued and less fulfilled than deep personal reflection or solitary activities that offer emotional satisfaction. Elaine is not alone in her experience. Consider Lewis, an 80-year-old retired doctor who once chaired hospital committees, spoke at conferences, and always had someone to dine with. In retirement, he tried to keep up the same pace. But every invitation, every dinner, every update on someone's grandkids began to feel like noise. Not because he didn't care, but because the performances of identity had become tiring. He eventually stopped attending the monthly meetups. Instead, he began keeping a daily handwritten journal, documenting his thoughts, sketching trees he admired from his porch, and writing letters he never planned to send. Lewis said something unforgettable in one interview. I spent most of my life trying to be someone worth knowing. Now I just want to know myself. The liberation of later life isn't in who you surround yourself with. It's in finally being content with who you are when no one else is around. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I highly recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. Your support truly keeps us going. It gives us the energy to keep creating meaningful and inspiring content for everyone. Now let's jump right back into it. Number 2, peace becomes more valuable than socializing. Margaret used to dread silence. Her calendar, packed with coffee dates, card games, and neighborhood meetings, was her defense against stillness. It wasn't until she skipped a lunch with her book club by accident that she realized how exhausted she was. The silence that afternoon wasn't hollow. It was healing. She sat on her porch, the sun warming her skin, listening to birds rather than complaints about politics or the rising cost of eggs. That day, Margaret decided to do something that startled her friends. She unsubscribed from the club group chat, not out of disdain, but gratitude. She realized she didn't need it anymore. Peace is a rare and precious thing. In our 70s, we understand its true value. We've endured enough chaos, enough crisis. We've listened to enough gossip. And now we earn our rest. Choosing peace isn't giving up on life. It's embracing it more intimately. Neuropsychiatrist Dr. Daniel Amen has long advocated for the importance of brain rest in aging populations. According to his studies, reducing social overload and focusing on mindfulness and quietude can significantly lower the risk of cognitive decline. Research published in the Journal of Aging and Mental Health supports this view, noting that seniors who regularly engage in moments of intentional silence or low-stimulation environments experience improved emotional regulation and decreased rates of depression. The study concluded that quiet time, especially when paired with reflection or nature exposure, helps build psychological resilience later in life. Let's take another example. Tom, a 79-year-old widower who once hosted weekly poker nights at his home. After his wife passed, he continued them out of routine, not joy. Every week the house filled with noise, cigars, laughter, idle chatter. But Tom, sitting at the edge of the table, often felt detached, almost like an actor playing a part he no longer enjoyed. One night he simply said, "Boys, I think this chapter's over." The group was stunned. Tom wasn't angry or sad, he was clear. That weekend he repotted his late wife's garden, brewed coffee with vinyl jazz playing softly in the background, and read through the letters she'd written him over 40 years of marriage. It was the quietest Saturday of his year, and as he later shared with his granddaughter, the happiest. Peace is not the absence of people, it's the presence of meaning. As we age, we learn that not every silence must be filled. Not every empty chair means loneliness. Sometimes stillness is a space to finally breathe. Number 3, fewer friendships, fewer disappointments. William once believed in forever friends. He had 6 friends from college he met every year for a reunion. But as the years passed, phone calls went unanswered, emails unreturned. At their last reunion, only 2 showed up. He was hurt at first, then relieved. He realized many of those friendships were bound by time, not truth. They had shared experiences, but not shared growth. William began investing instead in his relationship with his daughter and in mentoring young men in his town's veterans program. Real connections, present ones. When we shrink our circle, we don't become smaller. We become sharper, more intentional. We make room for genuine ties to thrive, unburdened by the ghosts of obligation. And William's story is echoed by many. In fact, a 2021 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that older adults with fewer but higher quality relationships reported significantly lower levels of stress and social fatigue. The researchers emphasized the emotional toll of social maintenance, particularly when reciprocation is absent. Let's take Mavis, a 72-year-old artist who used to host a monthly potluck for nearly a dozen friends. Over time, she noticed she was the only one organizing, following up, preparing meals, and even cleaning up after everyone left. When she hinted she might need help next time, the silence was louder than any RSVP. She canceled the next month's dinner, and the month after that. No one followed up. Instead of feeling abandoned, she felt clarity. She turned her dining room into an art studio, put on soft instrumental music, and started painting again. "I'd been feeding others for years," she said. "It was time I fed my soul." The truth is, the older we get, the less time and energy we have for imbalance. We're no longer willing to carry relationships that expect us to give without receiving anything meaningful in return. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I highly recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. Your support truly keeps us going. It gives us the energy to keep creating meaningful and inspiring content for everyone. Now let's jump right back into it. Number 4, time becomes precious. Richard once joked that after retirement, every day was Saturday, but he soon realized that even Saturdays had to be lived intentionally. The long lunches filled with surface-level stories began to feel like wasted chapters in his book of life. One Tuesday morning, Richard skipped a group brunch and instead took a train to a nearby town he had always wanted to visit. He walked the streets, took photos, and sat in a quiet cafe with a new novel. That day stayed with him far longer than a dozen social gatherings combined. Time in our later years becomes less elastic. We feel it, we count it, and most importantly, we learn to honor it. In a 2018 study published in The Gerontologist, researchers found that seniors who prioritize meaningful use of time, whether through travel, hobbies, or solitude, reported significantly higher satisfaction levels than those who merely stayed socially busy out of obligation. But it's not just about productivity or goals, it's about presence. Take Celia, for example. At 77, she began practicing slow living. No phone before breakfast, no multitasking during meals. She would sit on her porch and watch the sunrise with a cup of tea, not as a ritual, but as a moment. I used to measure my worth by how many events I attended in a week. Now I measure it by how deeply I feel each day, she said. Neurologists at the University of British Columbia have found that mindfulness-based practices in older adults not only improve emotional well-being, but also preserve cognitive function. Attention to the present moment, the study concluded, is among the most valuable cognitive exercises for aging brains. The truth is, when you reach a certain age, time becomes not just something you manage, but something you revere. You stop giving it away carelessly. You stop wasting it in rooms where your spirit feels tired. You begin to ask the simplest, most sacred question: is this how I want to spend my life today? And when the answer is no, you give yourself the grace to walk away. Number 5. True companionship comes from within. Eleanor was never alone. Her house was full of voices: kids, grandkids, old friends. Yet she always felt slightly out of place. It wasn't until a solo weekend retreat in the mountains that she experienced something strange: belonging. Not to a group, but to herself. She began hiking weekly, journaling, learning guitar, not for anyone else, just because it made her smile. She stopped waiting for companionship to arrive and started cultivating it from within. Being alone and being lonely are not the same. Solitude can be rich, nourishing, and profoundly joyful when it is chosen. Dr. Vivek Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon General, has written extensively about loneliness, but also emphasizes that solitude can be healing when balanced with intentional connection and self-awareness. We often forget that many of history's most insightful thinkers, writers, philosophers, artists, sought solitude not out of isolation, but inspiration. Eleanor's retreat echoed the same truth. In the stillness, the self finally speaks. There's also a scientific basis for this inner transformation. A 2020 study published in Psychology and Aging concluded that older adults who engaged in intentional solitude, such as reflective journaling, solo nature walks, and meditative practices, experienced lower levels of stress hormones like cortisol and reported higher self-esteem and emotional stability. Consider also the case of Bernard, an 81-year-old former attorney. After his wife passed, friends urged him to socialize more, but he declined most invitations. Instead, he began writing letters to himself: thoughts, fears, memories, jokes he once shared with his wife. Over time, he said, "I stopped missing company. I started enjoying my own." Eleanor and Bernard both discovered something modern society often fails to teach. Self-companionship is a skill and a gift. And after 70, it may be the most important one of all. Number 6, letting go leads to greater fulfillment. James had a rule: always say yes to invitations. He believed staying busy meant staying young. But somewhere along the way, his yes became an anchor. One night, sitting in his car outside a party he didn't want to attend, he finally asked himself, why? Why was he spending his twilight years doing things that no longer sparked joy? He drove home. That night, he watched an old Western movie, made himself a bowl of popcorn, and fell asleep with his dog curled at his feet. It was the happiest he'd been in months. Letting go isn't loss. It's choosing yourself. It's making space for new passions, simpler joys, and deeper peace. This isn't about shutting the world out. It's about opening your world inwards to what you love, what excites you, what heals you. For some, it's art. For others, travel. For many, it's simply the freedom to say no more, without guilt. Dr. Laura Carstensen, director of the Stanford Center on Longevity, has spoken extensively about what she calls the positivity effect in aging. Her research shows that older adults tend to focus more on emotionally meaningful goals and experiences. Letting go of draining social obligations fits precisely within this framework. It allows the mind and body to gravitate toward fulfillment, not fatigue. Consider 74-year-old Gloria, who was once the social glue of her retirement community. But after years of organizing every potluck and holiday event, she stepped away. I started saying no more, and suddenly life got quieter, but also more beautiful, she reflected. She now spends her mornings gardening, her afternoons reading, and her evenings listening to vinyl records with a glass of wine. She let go of roles she had outgrown, and in doing so, she grew back into herself. That's the gift of this chapter of life. You begin to understand that fulfillment isn't found in proving, pleasing, or participating. It's found in peace, and peace requires space. Space that's only available when you're brave enough to let go. We spend much of our lives trying to be seen. But in the end, what really matters is whether we can see ourselves clearly, kindly, and with compassion. After 70, friendships don't have to define you. Your calendar doesn't have to be full to prove your life is rich. Sometimes the truest abundance is found in empty space, in the quiet moments where you reconnect with who you are beneath all the noise. Elaine found her voice in poetry. Margaret found hers in silence. James found his in letting go. And maybe, just maybe, your story is unfolding the same way, in the in-between, where meaning lives. So here's to peace over pressure, stillness over status, and to remembering the best friend you'll ever have is already with you. Thank you for watching. If this message stirred something in your heart, I hope you'll stay a little longer. Subscribe, share, reflect, and maybe even begin your own gentle rebellion.